areas mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain, but we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday though. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Very good morning. It's me and Mark Dolan today on a Friday morning. A lot happening this morning, Mark, particularly the by-election from last night in Rochdale.
Well, definitely. What are the implications for what many think is an incoming Labour government? Is this the shape of things to come? Division for Keir Starmer?
That's right. And also doping in sport. Are we going to have a doping games?
Yes, can I stress we're both clean this morning? Plus, Rwanda could cost $500 million. Is it worth the money?
See you in a minute.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama. And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions. We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 9:30 on Friday, the 1st of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Mark Dolan this morning.
Indeed. Now, Galloway takes Rochdale. This is for Gaza, says George Galloway.
In enabling Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
Controversial by-elections in history. What does this mean for Labour in power? And also, what does it tell us about British politics in an election year?
And political fallout. We're going to be bringing you the latest from across Westminster and beyond as Britain awaits to this shock result. Galloway's victory is already causing reaction from all parties, with Nigel Farage warning about sectarian politics in the UK.
Is it? Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
And on another day, this would be the big story. Rwanda costs soar. The government will have to pay £370 million under the UK-Rwanda partnership, according to new reports. Can Sunak salvage the scheme, and is it worth the money?
And UK Eurovision release, our entry to the music showpiece event. Ollie Alexander releases his song Dizzy. Will we have better luck this time? So we have got a lot to get through in the next 2.5 hours. It is 2.5 hours.
Well, it is actually. And do you know what? It's not only Rochdale, it's not only Rwanda. I'm a bit concerned about Geri Halliwell's marriage because her husband is still in hot water. We'll talk about this growing F1 scandal.
Absolutely. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Mark, Bev, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 9:30, and as we've been hearing this morning, the top story is, of course, that George Galloway has won the seat of Rochdale, taking just under 40% of the vote following an unusual campaign in what should have been a safe Labour seat.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
That was the returning MP's message to the Labour leader following a campaign that focused heavily on the war in Gaza. The leader of the Workers' Party and former Labour MP himself has also enjoyed a varied media career, presenting programmes for both Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Labour, though, have dismissed the result, saying that he only won because they didn't have a candidate in the running, following their dismissal of Azhar Ali for spreading anti-Israel conspiracy theories. Well, taking to the stage last night, this is what Mr Galloway had to say.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
In other news, the cost of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million. That's in addition to hundreds of thousands more for each migrant who's deported. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. And there'll also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated there, with more than £150,000 allocated per person. That's to cover processing and integration costs. The government, though, insists the plan is vital to clamping down on illegal migration. And the UK's Eurovision entry has now dropped.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until the morning?
Ollie Alexander has launched his brand new single, you heard it there, called Dizzy, ahead of this year's song contest that's due to take place in Sweden in May. The 33-year-old singer has already landed 5 top 10 UK singles and 2 #1 albums with his band Years and Years. And he says that the new single, he hopes, will transport you to somewhere magical. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or of course go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning.
Live telly, eh?
It's all a little bit manic in the morning.
Because she's been busy. She's been getting texts from Christian Horner. I don't know what it's about, but apparently not broadcastable on a family show. Look, we've got so much to talk about today.
There is. What a great morning to be on the telly. We're not normally on a Friday morning, but we are happy to do so because a huge story last night from my hometown of Greater Manchester, actually. I grew up in Bury, but this is Rochdale, part of Greater Manchester. George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
Most definitely. In a once safe Labour seat where the party came forth, this was his victory message to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
I was desperate to see the result of this last night. I don't know about you. I was out with GB News last night at a news quiz. GB News did very, very well, beat most of our competition, just to be clear about that.
That's right.
But going to bed at 1 o'clock this morning, couldn't turn off GB News, actually. Yeah. Well done, Tom Harwood, for doing the coverage throughout the night, because the implications of this are enormous. Now, why? This is George Galloway, a very controversial figure, who has stood on the ticket of a Middle East issue.
That's right, yeah.
And I'm sort of astonished that Middle East issue, which is no doubt miserable and the casualties are mounting up, but that has determined who the MP is going to be in Rochdale.
Most definitely. A war thousands of miles from here in the Middle East is already impacting the shape and appearance of the House of Commons. Now, of course, George Galloway is the comeback king. He's had a remarkable political career. And there are lots of implications because, yes, this is about what's happening in the Middle East, but what does it tell us about a potential Labour government, how divided they'll be on Israel and other matters? And it seems to be personal between George Galloway and Keir Starmer. Galloway said this is Starmer's worst nightmare.
Yeah, well, joining us now is political editor Christopher Hope. Good morning, Christopher. Very good morning to you. Are you in Rochdale, Chris? It looks like it.
Yeah, it's snowing on me. Hi, Mark. Hi, Bev. Yeah, it's snowing. I'm out in George Galloway's having breakfast about 100 yards away from me at the moment. He's tucking into some bacon and eggs after a night when he basically put one across the main parties, with Labour and the Tory party pushed into third and fourth place. George Galloway's statement overnight when he said that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are two cheeks of the same backside. They both got well and truly spanked here tonight in Rochdale. That is certainly the case. I mean, there's no question he's won a majority of 6,000. It was a 10,000 majority when the late Labour MP died back in January. So he's earned his breakfast this morning, but what it means for politics back in Westminster, we're going to wait and see, because, of course, he's going to be sworn in on Monday, and then he'll be pursuing his agenda about the Gaza war and why he thinks there should be immediate cessation of hostilities there repeatedly, and that could make for some very interesting months ahead in Parliament.
Christopher, what does this result tell the rest of the parties? Who is waking up with the biggest headache this morning? Presumably, Keir Starmer.
Yeah, certainly Keir Starmer is deeply embarrassed. Their candidate Azhar Ali was disowned by the party after recordings emerged of him making some really dreadful remarks about the Jews and Israel after the ballot papers had been printed. So voters here thought they were voting for a Labour candidate, even though he'd been disowned by the party. They've issued an apology this morning. The Labour Party are pledging to win back this seat in the forthcoming general election, probably later in November. The Tories also had a bad night, although coming third isn't so bad in Rochdale. Reform had a dreadful night. They came sixth, fewer than 2,000 votes for Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP who represented Rochdale all those years ago. So a big swipe across the. Now, this is an unusual by-election. The candidate who came second, David Tully, independent, is a season ticket holder at Rochdale Football Club. He fought on a mandate of trying to bring better NHS facilities here in Rochdale. So I think you've got the irony of having an international agenda for the winner. He said this is for Gaza, George Galloway, when he won, and the guy who came second was a hyper-local candidate. It's an unusual by-election. George Galloway, for his part, he's declaring he's emulated Churchill. He's now one of the only one of two MPs ever to represent 4 different towns or cities in their lifetimes. The other was the wartime leader, Winston Churchill.
Now, Chopper, congratulations. You get all the glamorous locations. I would imagine that Keir Starmer's mood will be gloomy this morning, just like the weather in Rochdale. First of all, George Galloway, a famous and outspoken critic of Keir Starmer. There's an element to which this is personal, don't you think?
Yeah, well, there could be. I mean, he certainly pinned it firmly on Keir Starmer, didn't he, last night, when he said you'll pay a high price, he said, in enabling and encouraging and covering the catastrophe going on in occupied Palestine on the Gaza Strip. Those are George Galloway's words, and it will only raise the tension when he returns to Parliament for the first time in 9 years, Mr Galloway. His party, the Workers' Party of Britain, plans to stand in 59 seats across the country, and you mentioned earlier what this means for Keir Starmer. That could be a problem, I think, in some seats where there's a high Muslim population. If the Gaza conflict carries on into November, later this year, goes through the year, there could be other eruptions of this kind of politics as we go forward in what will be a huge year for this country.
Chopper, are you saying there, just on the record, that you think that the Workers' Party of Britain could cause Labour potentially to lose some seats at the next election? Is that possible, that the Workers' Party of Britain could be Labour's Reform UK?
I wouldn't say as wide a scale as that, but I think there are certain pockets of seats around the country where I think they will eat into support for Labour Party, and that will cause problems, definitely, Mark.
OK, thank you, Chris. Christopher Hope there in a glorious Rochdale. As you can see, we're going to be talking to other people up there this morning as well. Alan Miller from the Together Declaration, he was there for the last few days in a very sort of apolitical capacity, actually, but finding out what was motivating the people of Rochdale. I mean, the turnout as well, again, we don't get very good turnouts, do we? Should we look at what the results were from last night? Let's look at all the figures, bring you up to speed. So, George Galloway, 39.7% of the votes. Azir Ali, the Labour Party, 7.7%.
David Tully, Independent, 21.3%. Paul Ellison, Conservatives, 12%.
Simon Danchuk for Reform, 6.3%, and a local lad as well, of course. Ian Donaldson, Lib Dem, 7%. But George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain stormed it with almost 40% of the vote, saying this is a win for Gaza.
Yes, I mean, I think that something we have to do and make a priority is to ask ourselves, why does it matter to you? Because in the end, you're talking about these far-flung issues like the war in Gaza, which is a great humanitarian concern, but it shouldn't really affect British voters. But does it tell us that Labour potentially could be quite divided in power? We're going to explore that shortly.
And it shows you how organised some communities are around the country when they want to get things done. Who has this woken up this morning? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. In just a moment, we're going to be talking to pollster Matt Goodwin to tell us what all of these results could mean for Britain as we head towards the next general election. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread.
and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment and the bureaucracy and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows that he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, returning to the big political news of the day, as George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has swept to victory in the Rochdale by-election.
But what could this victory mean for the mainstream parties? And is this, as he warned, Sir Keir Starmer's worst nightmare?
Well, joining us now is top pollster and political scientist Matthew Goodwin. Hey, Matthew, your reaction to the results last night and this morning?
Well, I mean, obviously it's bad news for the Labour Party. This is potentially the beginning of a serious rebellion against Keir Starmer and the party's positioning around Israel-Gaza. But let me be a dissenting voice this morning, Mark. Here's what I think. Look, Galloway will be a problem for Labour. He's a charismatic campaigner and so on. But if you actually look at the seats where Galloway is going to be running, seats with large numbers of British Muslims, a lot of those seats, Mark, already have big Labour majorities. Now, when you also take into account the national polling, that Labour's likely, on current numbers this morning, probably going to win a majority of somewhere between 150 and 200 seats, I think at best Galloway maybe costs the Labour Party half a dozen seats. I mean, I think this is going to be a rebellion, in other words, that the Labour Party is actually going to be able to navigate. I think they're going to get away with actually moving past Galloway.
Will Galloway stand, do you think, Matt, in Rochdale? There's a talk that he would go to his former constituency in London.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I suspect Galloway will move away from Rochdale to somewhere like Bethnal Green and Bow, or somewhere in Birmingham, West Midlands, maybe Bradford, Yorkshire, where he's got that track record. But remember, right, you know, in the past, Galloway's not held his seats. I mean, yes, he's a charismatic campaigner, but if you look at the seats he's won previously at by-elections, he's never been able to turn this sort of lightning rod foreign policy issue into a sustainable national movement. There are not 60 George Galloways here, right? He said he's going to stand candidates in 60 seats. There are not 60 George Galloways. I mean, who else is in this party? We don't really know. So I don't think they're going to have the charismatic presence and the impact that we might be expecting them to have based on some of the commentary in some of the media this morning. Yes, he's a problem, but Mark, he's also potentially being overestimated.
Now, Matthew, you've just predicted that a Labour government is likely coming. Will it be one of division?
Well, Labour are divided on this issue of Israel-Gaza. They are, very strongly divided. We've seen that over recent weeks. Not just that. I mean, we've also got, I think, some lingering tensions from the Corbyn era, the Corbyn regime. You've got a lot of MPs that aren't really sure where the Labour Party stand on a number of big issues, Mark. Where are they on taxation? Where are they on industrial policy? Where are they on things like levelling up? They've just rolled back the Green Deal. Well, that's alienated a lot of Labour Party activists. To be frank, we don't really know that much about this incoming Labour government. I mean, if we look at the polls and we're going into some sort of Labour majority government, Labour minority government, whatever, we don't actually know that much about the party. We know instinctively where it wants to go, but actually there's a lot of detail that isn't there yet. And I think that's probably something that will inevitably find its expression in internal party tensions.
Really poor result overnight, Matt, for Richard Tice and the Reform Party. Simon Danchuk was a controversial character to select in that seat. But of course, he's very much a Rochdale, born and bred lad. We're seeing some pictures here of Richard Tice, who was canvassing up there with him. What does Richard do this morning? What does he learn from this result?
Well, Reform certainly underperformed. I mean, nationally, they're averaging 11% in the polls. We saw them do a little bit better than that at the Wellingborough by-election recently. They should have done a lot better in Rochdale. It does have quite a significant white working class vote. They should really have momentum behind them, given where they are nationally. So there is something not quite clicking here for Reform. I would even argue, Bev, as well, that Reform should have done better at both Wellingborough and Kingswood, given the enormous disillusionment there is in the country over the issues that Reform is targeting, stopping the small boats. We learned only yesterday from new data in the Home Office that we've only removed 1.3% of people who have come over on small boats. We also learned yesterday that we're granting 99% of all asylum applications to people from the likes of Afghanistan and so on. Now Reform, based on this fiasco in government, should be doing a lot better. So something isn't clicking. Is it money? Is it manpower? Is it leadership? Is it charisma? What is it?
But is it just voter apathy? Because you've just said then about the white working class man and woman who might want to go out and feel that Reform represents their small c conservative values. They aren't organised, that community. We've seen last night the Muslim community, they support each other. They know what they want. They go out there, they canvass, they get their mates, they get their families, they're getting their votes out. How do you change that if somebody like Richard Tice wants to do well?
I think it's a good point. I think you said at the beginning that the turnout rates at by-elections have been low, and that's certainly true. I mean, we've seen turnout rates again below 40%. And if you look at what's happened to the 2019 Conservative vote, only about 45–50% of those voters are still loyal to the Conservatives. Most of them are not going to Reform. As you rightly point out, most of them are saying they're not going to vote at all. They're saying they're going to sit the next election out. So it's not just that Richard Tice has to figure out a way of building an electorate and getting them excited and getting them motivated to vote. He's also actually got to convince them not to drift into apathy, not to just give up on the political system altogether. And that too, by the way, is a big problem facing Rishi Sunak. So it may be that the real winner at the next election actually isn't George Galloway. It may be that the winner is apathy and disillusionment.
Yeah, Matthew Goodwin, briefly, if you can. This victory has been achieved for George Galloway as a result largely of the Muslim vote. Is Nigel Farage right to say this is the beginning of sectarian politics in the United Kingdom?
I think it's certainly the beginning of a more divided politics that's really reflecting the extent to which we are importing grievances and conflicts from abroad, and it's going to become much more visible in the years ahead. If you look at the projections for how Britain's population is going to evolve over the next 6 years or so, we're going to see between 2010 and 2030 a 94% increase in the number of British Muslims in the country. So we'll say about 6 million. Now, so what I'm saying is this is going to have a significant impact on politics.
We've got to wrap it up, Matt. I'm so sorry we could talk to you all morning, but we have run out of time. Democracy at work. Nearly 40% of the voters in Rochdale voted for George Galloway. Why? Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday though. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, the Rwanda scheme could cost up to £500 million. Is it worth it? Christian Horner, who is Jerry Halliwell's husband, and that story about flirty texts will not go away.
Don't go anywhere.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system. And
so there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 1st of March. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Mark Dolan, and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, if you're waking up to the news, Galloway has taken Rochdale. George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has delivered a stunning defeat to the mainstream parties by sweeping the seat of Rochdale with 39.7% of the vote.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
We will be bringing you the latest from across Westminster and beyond as Britain awakes to this shock result. His victory already has many talking as Nigel Farage warns about sectarian politics in the UK.
Is it? Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
And this is depressing. Rwanda costs have soared. The government spending watchdog announces that the UK will have to pay at least £370 million to cover its Rwanda scheme. It is a huge price tag. Do you think it's worth it?
You make me dizzy from your kisses. Will you take my hand and spin me round and round?
And UK Eurovision release. Our entry to the music showpiece event, Ollie Alexander releases his song Dizzy. The video's making me dizzy, I'll be honest with you. Will we have better luck this time?
Get in touch with us this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com. Our panel will be here in just a moment as well. And we're going to be discussing, it's a bit of tittle-tattle really, but the Spice Girl, Jerry Halliwell / Horner. Her husband, as you know, Red Bull Racing, was in trouble. He's been cleared, but...
Well, this is it. It's a dilemma for her. What happens when your partner is accused of flirting with a colleague? We'll talk about the wider implications.
All right, first though, the news with Sam.
Good morning from the GB Newsroom. The headlines at 10, and of course leading the news this morning is George Galloway's victory in Rochdale. He took just under 40% of the vote, following an unusual campaign in what should have been a safe Labour seat. The returning MP told crowds that his victory was for Gaza, following a campaign that focused heavily on conflicts in the Middle East. The leader of the Workers' Party and the former Labour MP also had a varied media career, presenting programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Labour, though, have dismissed the result, saying that he only won because it didn't support a candidate, following the dismissal of Azhar Ali for spreading anti-Israel conspiracy theories. Taking to the stage last night, Mr Galloway again spoke of that conflict in Gaza.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
Well, in response, the Labour Party's Deputy National Campaign Coordinator, Ellie Reeves, told GB News earlier that last night's result isn't how they wanted the by-election to play out.
Well, we didn't stand a candidate in the by-election, and that's regrettable, but Keir Starmer took swift action when those comments of Azhar Ali came to light, and he was suspended from Labour. So he went into this by-election without a candidate. You know, when you look at previous by-elections, just 2 weeks ago, we had victories in Wellingborough and in Kingswood. In Wellingborough, we had a swing to Labour of 28.5%.
The cost of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million, plus hundreds of thousands more for each migrant that's sent there. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. There'll also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated to the African nation, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. The government, though, has insisted the plan is vital, they say, to clamping down on illegal migration. Meanwhile, the former Borders and Immigration Inspector has said that the government made perverse decisions in its rush to clear the backlog of asylum seekers. David Neal was sacked last week amid a row over the quality of borders checks. In a new report, though, he suggests the routine quality assurance has been sacrificed for increased productivity. Neal blames the Home Office for allowing the asylum system to become what he calls a burning platform. Meanwhile, a separate report has also revealed that more than 460 children went missing from hotels in less than 3 years, with 147 still unaccounted for. In other news, in Russia, tight security surrounds the burial of opposition politician Alexei Navalny, who died suddenly 2 weeks ago in an Arctic prison. In the run-up to the funeral today, his family accused Russian authorities of blocking plans to hold a bigger memorial service, something that the Kremlin has denied. Navalny's allies also accused President Putin of murder because he feared his potential release. The death certificate, though, according to reports, say that Navalny died of natural causes. Back here in the UK, MPs are set to consider a proposed law to ban LGBT conversion practices. The bill would impose unlimited fines on offenders who offer or advertise services to change a person's sexual orientation or to change a person to or from being transgender. It's the third time the long-delayed law has been considered, following pledges from former Prime Ministers, including Theresa May and Boris Johnson. A government survey in 2017 found that just 5% of Britain's LGBT community had been offered conversion therapy in an attempt to change their sexuality. And finally, the UK's Eurovision entry has now dropped.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until...
Ollie Alexander has launched that brand new single called Dizzy ahead of this year's song contest that's due to take place in Sweden in May. The 33-year-old singer has already landed 5 top 10s in the UK and 2 #1 albums with his band Years and Years. He hopes the new single will, he says, transport you somewhere magical. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning.
Yes.
10:07, Mark Dolan's here. I'm not normally here on a Friday either, so thank you for joining us this morning. It's a treat for us.
Yes, indeed, because we've got so much to talk about. Rwanda, is it worth the money? And the result of the Rochdale election. What does it mean for an incoming Labour government?
And you have all been getting in touch at home. Graham has said the UK's Conservative and Labour governments have totally disregarded the population change within the UK. They've ignored the concerns of the indigenous population regarding our control of migration into the UK. Now, the voting demographic landscape is changing, and Rochdale is what happens.
Indeed. Tim says, why does George Galloway think that Starmer or Sunak are responsible for the war in Gaza? They have no influence whatsoever.
But also, Galloway will have no influence whatsoever on Gaza. I find that fascinating. What benefit can he bring to Gaza
Well,
now?
I think he's a thorn in the side to Keir Starmer in the run-up to the next election. Now, he has had a platform in the past, George Galloway. He's a quite respected broadcaster. He's a former MP, but he's back in the House of Commons, and I think he can make life uncomfortable for Keir Starmer. Maybe not in terms of votes or anything like that, but just the optics.
Shelley has said, I can't believe George Galloway took Rochdale. What a disgrace. Gaza shouldn't have a place in British politics. Jennifer says, Galloway could have won the seat with topics such as grooming gang scandals, but no, he did the opposite, and he won the vote on a foreign policy. If you are in Rochdale this morning, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
What really genuinely matters to the people of Rochdale? Is it the potholes? Is it your bins? Is it your schools? Is it the car parks? What is it?
Yes. Well, it's all of those things, isn't it? And much more. And it's not Gaza, a war that we're concerned about in the Middle East, but not something that's affecting our viewers and listeners. And that's, of course, what we're all about here at GB News.
Right. First of all, the cost of Rishi Sunak's troubled Rwanda asylum scheme could soar to £500 million.
Yes, indeed. The Home Office has so far refused to say how much more it'll cost on top of the £300 million already confirmed.
But a National Audit Office report has revealed that a whopping £150 million has been earmarked for the partnership with Rwanda over the next 3 years.
So that's on top
of the £300 million.
Indeed, that includes a price tag for each migrant's plane ticket. I think you're looking at about 11 grand a head.
11 grand a head. Are they going on private jets and being served champagne on the way? There's a boost once the first 300 migrants have been relocated to Rwanda.
And by the end of the year, the Home Office will have incurred direct costs to establishing the agreement. You're looking at something in the region of nearly £500 million.
So let's talk to our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Morning, Mark. I just said to Mark Dolan, who isn't normally here in the morning, that we talk about this a lot, don't we, in this time slot? And I think our viewers are utterly exasperated by this story. Is there any good news, Mark? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
Sadly, no, there's no good news, really. Just a better understanding, I think, about what this policy is going to cost the UK taxpayer. Now, we'd already known that £290 million in upfront costs had already been paid by the British government for the Rwanda partnership. So it's not just about the accommodation of these asylum seekers in Rwanda. It's also about investing in Rwanda, in its economy, in its development. And that was going to cost £290 million initially. But the government acknowledged there would be many millions more that would be paid over the lifetime of this scheme. Now the National Audit Office have very kindly given us their estimate of a breakdown of what the figures are likely to be, and they put it at around about £500 million a year. So that clearly is very significant. People have extrapolated and said that, you know, if 300 migrants go, then that's going to be about 2 million or so per migrant. I'm not sure that's particularly helpful or accurate in terms of the scheme itself, because you've got to, if you look at the individual migrants, I think we're giving 170,000 per asylum seeker that goes to Rwanda. Now that's a lot, there's no doubt, but it's not much different to what we would be paying here in the UK to keep them in hotel accommodation for a year and all of the wraparound services that they would have. So the scheme itself, the overall scheme, is very expensive.
Yes, I mean,
per migrant going, it's roughly equivalent to what it is in the UK.
Mark White, I'm going to go out there on this one. I'm going to say that actually, if it works, the Rwanda scheme can be as expensive as it wants. If it costs £1 billion to make it happen, then I say bring it on. But the question is the case, the argument that if Rwanda happens, it will be a strong disincentive, is that still convincing?
Well, it might be if it ever comes off. I think they'll love you at Marsham Street, Mark, in terms of James Cleverly. He really has been up against it since he left the Foreign Office and went to the Home Office brief. It has been absolutely relentless, the hammering that the Home Office has been getting in recent weeks. And that is, you know, in terms of the sort of what they say is this kind of disincentive to come to the UK is the bigger picture that they say is getting lost in just talking about £500 million, as big a price as that is, because the government's plan is that once people, if they ever start going to Rwanda, start going there, they believe that will deter people from crossing the English Channel. And if they can stop a few thousand people from crossing the English Channel, then that's clearly going to impact the cost of housing and all of these wraparound services for those asylum seekers.
But Mark White,
should they have made it here, they say, yes.
You're one of the key experts on this subject. Are you convinced that if Rwanda happens, it will stop the boats? Do you think it will be a disincentive?
I think if Rwanda had happened in April of 2022, when Boris Johnson first announced the policy, it would have been a deterrent. There's no doubt. I went across to France and there were lots of migrants across there who were very concerned about what that would mean for them. Because it's dragged on so long, now they just don't take it seriously. They think it's a bit of a laughing stock. And unless the government commits to actually putting very significant numbers of people that come across the channel to Rwanda, then I don't think the policy will act as a deterrent, because people will just take the risk. There's a calculation there. If they're only going to send 2,000 or 3,000 people, yet in a year 30, 40, 50,000 people might cross the channel, the chances of you actually being sent are relatively small, and perhaps for them worth the risk.
Mark, can you just break down this £11,000 per flight? Is that involving, I guess, security, etc., for these passengers?
Yes, I mean, it seems a lot, and it is a lot. But the truth of it is, they're not sending them on EasyJet or Ryanair at a nice discounted price. They've got to charter private aircraft and provide all the wraparound security that that aircraft will require to take, you know, potentially dozens, maybe 100 or more asylum seekers at a time on these flights. So they're quite complex in nature to manage. They need the extra security there as well. So that's why you're talking about 11,000 per ticket. But that 11,000 per ticket is minuscule, really, in the overall cost of the Rwanda policy.
Of course. Mark, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, still to come, if you're just joining us, George Galloway won the Rochdale by-election last night, and he pledged to Sir Keir Starmer, he said...
For the role that you have played.
He said, you ain't seen nothing yet. He said, this is for Gaza. I thought it was a little menacing, actually, and he said Sir Keir Starmer will pay a high price for this. We'll be reflecting on that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom with Bev Turner and Mark Dolan this morning on GB.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had two brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks, or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews at gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10:19. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Mark Dolan.
Yes, indeed. Joining us now is our top panel, political commentator Emma Webb and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner.
Right, ladies, what are we going to talk about? There's only one big story in town this morning. This is George Galloway winning this by-election. Emma, your assessment of this result?
I think that this is, frankly, a bit terrifying. Not just because it's George Galloway, but I think this is the beginning of really sectarian democratic politics in this country. It is going to put the fear of God into Keir Starmer because he's going to realise that it's not just the Conservative Party who are going to be sort of stormed at in these by-elections, but at the next general election. And just how much demographic plays into this. I noticed in some of the reporting on this, the phrase used Muslim constituencies.
Yeah.
This is sectarian politics, and I don't think that we can really overstate how much this has been overlooked and how important this is when it comes to shoring up our democracy. We just saw what happened with Parliament being changing its processes because they were afraid of death threats from Islamists against Labour MPs. This is a very, very serious and pivotal time for our democracy, and I think we should be concerned by this.
I think there have been little clues in the past. I mean, do you remember when Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, surprisingly and amazingly forgot to wear a poppy in a video addressing British Muslims in the run-up to Armistice Day? You know, and I think that was a sort of flavour of things to come, which is perhaps the placation of this significant new political constituency.
Yeah. And Labour traditionally have, Amy, about 70% of Muslims will vote for Labour. It felt like that was a demographic that was a shoo-in for Keir Starmer, and then October the 7th happened, and that has sent reverberations all across the political landscape in this country. How do you greet the news of Galloway's win?
Well, Rochdale have spoken and they've made their feelings very clear about, I think it obviously was, in the end, on a single issue of Gaza, but I wouldn't put that although, yes, 36% of the Rochdale constituency is Muslim. It's across the board. It was from a great span of the constituency. He got 12,000 votes. But this isn't... people aren't just unhappy with Labour's response to the situation in Gaza. People are unhappy with the political class's response to Gaza. And I think that's what Rochdale are making clear. It sends a strong message nationally that politicians need to change their tact if they want to keep people on side. I think this is the protests that we've seen, which are the biggest since the protests against the war in Iraq. This is it coming to fruition through a democratic vote. I think that's what we're seeing here.
Tough to be a Jewish person in Rochdale this morning, Emma.
Well, if I would be afraid. Yeah. I mean, so George Galloway is also saying he's going to stand a number of candidates for this new party of
59.
his, very communist-sounding name, across the country, and also in addition to that, that he'll show his support for certain independent candidates. Now, I wonder whether he might be referring to the possibility of Tanzim Akunji, who was Shamima Begum's lawyer, who plans to run in Tower Hamlets against Roshanara Ali, who also we know faced protests because of her position on, or not taking a strong enough position, they thought, on the Gaza conflict. And so I think that this is a concerning change in our democracy. And yes, the people of Rochdale have spoken, but surely, I mean, given that we've seen the way that anti-Semitism has become so brazen in certain parts of the country, and particularly every Saturday in London. And I think that it was right for Paul Scully to say no-go zones, because it is a no-go zone in central London for people who are visibly Jewish. Of course you would be afraid to go to certain areas under the current circumstances if you were visibly Jewish. And I think that this just adds to that, because it shows that someone like George Galloway, who is coming sort of from a standing start, as it were, is actually able to win a by-election. That is unheard of.
And it shows a level of massive organisation in that area.
I'm not completely convinced of that, because George Galloway's won 6 elections over his time as a politician. So it's not unheard of. I think it mischaracterises the protests on the weekends to say that they are anti-Semitic and they're intimidating to Jewish people, because there are Jewish people on the marches. I think it's also setting a dangerous precedent to characterise anything anti-Israel or any critique of the IDF as anti-Semitic, because it undermines what real true anti-Semitism
Would you
is.
say the
I know
same
there
for
is.
Islamophobia, that criticism of Islamism is not Islamophobic then?
Islamophobia has gone up by 300%.
So you think anti-Semitism is acceptable, but Islamophobia is not?
I'm not saying anti-Semitism is acceptable in any way, shape or form.
You said that criticism of Israel and Jewish people is anti-Semitic.
No.
Criticism of Islamism is surely not
Mark, you've misunderstood
Islamophobic.
me. You've misunderstood me. What I'm saying is a critique of Israel is not instantly anti-Semitic.
Sure.
And we're getting to the point where if you attend a march which is against the military action in Israel, you're automatically deemed anti-Semitic. And that is what I think is completely wrong.
Would you confirm that criticism of Islam is not Islamophobic?
What is Islamophobic?
You want to answer that question?
Hang on, wait. You don't let me answer the question.
Because
You
you
jump on me. Right, what is Islamophobic? Is an irrational fear of Islam.
Still
which
no answer
I
to my question.
see...
Well, actually,
hang on, what are you saying? To be critical of Islam, is that Islamophobic? No, you can be critical of any religion.
OK, fine.
But I'm saying we do have an Islamophobic society because we do harbour irrational threats of Islam all the time in our society.
Can I just be very clear about this, that the APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group of Islamophobia, is so easily weaponised against people just simply criticising Islam or Islamism. And the Labour Party actually want to adopt that definition. And that includes things like saying that Islam was spread by the sword, making comments about Muhammad being a paedophile, for example, because those are viewed as being used to bash the Muslim community. Now, you can see that there are people who have journalists who have investigated Islamism, who have been accused of Islamophobia, and people have tried to silence people from criticising Islam and extremism with accusations of Islamophobia. It is used as a blasphemy.
Well, what we all need to be incredibly careful of is to conflate Islamism with Islam.
Correct.
And being Muslim. And I think the problem at the moment is that the 4 million Muslims who living peacefully in Britain feel like Islamism is being associated with, which isn't helped by the likes of Lee Anderson saying a Muslim mayor has Islamist mates. Just because you're a Muslim
in defence of Lee Anderson, and I know that this is taking it slightly off on a tangent here, but I think it has to be said, Sadiq Khan has shown that he is supportive of a ceasefire. He has supported those people protesting and has been in favour of that. So to refer to those protesters as his mate is not saying, oh, they're his mates because they're Muslims, because, as you said yourself, a lot of those people who are protesting are not all Muslims.
But he wasn't talking about the protests, was he? He was talking about Islamists, extremists. And he said, by default of
many
being
of
a Muslim
whom are
mayor,
protesting,
being a Muslim mayor.
I think you're right.
But he also did say that Keir Starmer was being influenced, and Keir Starmer is not a Muslim.
Again, a massive inflammatory allegation, which he shouldn't have said, and it's just a nonsense.
Well, I mean, Keir Starmer did apparently pressure the Speaker into doing what he did to change those procedures on account of the fact that there were concerns about death against Labour MPs.
It's so difficult,
those
because
allegations.
It's so difficult because what we really want to do politically in this country, in every country, is we've got to bring people together. I don't see George Galloway saying, I'm going to win on a Gaza ticket and then I'm going to bring us all together. Then I'm going to get the Jews in my community to sit down with the Muslims in my community. He has no intention of doing that, does he? When he's standing on a ticket like this, it is always about creating more and more division.
Well, and it's also, like you said before, it shows the extraordinary level of community mobilisation that could allow him. And although you're right that he has been in politics for a long time and is a known figure, he is coming at this from a standing start in political party terms.
Yeah, Bev, I mean, we saw it in Northern Ireland with the Catholics and the Protestants, and we've seen it ongoing, but luckily, the troubles are behind us for now. But do we think that religion is going to shape the future of British politics? Because I just mentioned that anecdote of Keir Starmer forgetting to wear a poppy whilst addressing British Muslims before Armistice Day. Now, Labour has said it was a mistake, it was an accident. I'm not so sure. But do we think an incoming Labour government will be under pressure from one religion to adopt a set of policies?
It feels that way, though, doesn't it, Amy?
What do you think about that?
What do you think?
No, I don't think you can characterise any religion as having a homogenous vote and a homogenous view. I think that across the board, 80% of the British population are calling for supporting a ceasefire, because we have seen unfold on social media the most hideous atrocities, you know, images of babies dying in incubators in Gaza, and that has put people off politics and off the main parties. It's because they're out of step. Why does protest happen? Protest happens because you don't feel enfranchised by the political class. We have massive protests because they're out of step. If Keir Starmer had grown a backbone from the beginning and said what's going on in Gaza is wrong, the IDF need to pull out, then he would have kept the voters on side. It's because he was weak and he endorsed that collective punishment from the off with saying, yes, cut off the fuel, yes, cut off the water. He lost the voters.
If there were people here who, if Jewish people watching this would say, well, that was necessary. We needed Hamas to not gain ground.
Collective punishment of a 2 million person population, pushing them right down to the south, getting them in a big bulk, and then saying now we're going to have infantry go in and finish them off.
I mean, there have been international lawyers who have explained why it's not collective punishment. But I actually think that was one of the only instances where Keir Starmer did something admirable by having a backbone and standing up for the Jewish community.
But how long will it last?
OK, Emma, Amy, that's it for now. They will be back in just a little while, but still to come.
Where is Kate Middleton? Kensington Palace claim that she's doing well as she recovers from abdominal surgery. But many are asking how the Princess of Wales is doing, having not been seen since last year.
Intriguing, isn't it? You think they could at least just put out a picture of her, maybe just sat at home. That and much more after your morning's news with Sam Francis.
Mark, Beth, thank you very much. 10:31 exactly, and we start by recapping the top story this morning that George Galloway has won the seat of Rochdale. He took just under 40% of the vote following an unusual campaign in what should have been a safe Labour seat. The returning MP told crowds that his victory was for Gaza following a campaign that focused heavily on conflicts in the Middle East. The leader of the Workers' Party and former Labour MP also had a varied media career, presenting programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Labour, though, have dismissed last night's result, saying that he only won because it didn't support a candidate, following the dismissal of Azhar Ali for spreading anti-Israel conspiracy theories. The cost of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million, plus hundreds of thousands more for each migrant that's sent there. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. There'll also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated, with more than £150,000 per person over 5 years to cover ongoing costs. The government insists, though, the plan is vital to clamping down on illegal migration. LGBT conversion practices could be banned under a new law which MPs are considering for the third time. The bill would impose unlimited fines on any offenders who offer or advertise services to change a person's sexual orientation or to change a person to or from being transgender. And in Moscow, tight security is surrounding the burial of Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny, who died suddenly 2 weeks ago in an Arctic prison. His family has accused the Russian authorities of blocking their plans to hold a bigger public memorial service, something that the Kremlin has denied. Navalny's allies also accused President Putin of murder because he feared his potential release. His death certificate, according to reports, though, say he died of natural causes. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen, or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2627 and €1.1684. The price of gold is currently £1,622 and 43 pence. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,689 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come, as footballer Paul Pogba is given a 4-year ban for doping, do we need to crack down on performance-enhancing drugs in sports?
But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, a bit of good news for you. We're looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
Reacting fire suppression have just won a huge contract out in Dubai, all because of their infrastructure that Ed here has created in Chelmsford. So tell me the story, Ed.
So we obviously produce fire systems for, one of the areas we produce fire systems for is vehicles. So what we're seeing across the world is a huge investment into the fire protection on vehicles. You're starting to see it more on social media. Battery fires are becoming a thing on buses and coaches. So, but for the most of the part, a lot of public transport is still diesel-based or gas-based. So we've run a massive retrofit campaign in Dubai. That involves a huge quantity of parts, systems, that involves a huge quantity of machine parts. And it's a big logistical challenge, not only to supply the systems, but for the guys and our partner out there to install them. But what the investment that we've done here enables us to do is produce the quantity of parts that we need to get out the door in order to do the supply. And it keeps, for me, the biggest important point with that contract and other contracts is by being here, we don't need to hold the stock levels like a lot of OEMs would for the inevitable, this order might come in, this order comes in. When we get a particular order in, we're just making the parts we need for that particular contract. So unlike with a subcontractor, I'd need to hold all of these parts in stock. I've now got a very dynamic stock system where big order comes in, we make the parts behind us.
There you have it.
Brilliant.
Thinking ahead of that, you're ahead of your game. You're thinking about future-proofing the business and the industry. Congratulations. I think you're going to do really well.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, coming up, as Prince William returned to royal duties yesterday, there's a question which is echoing around the country. Where is Kate? We haven't seen her for weeks. So, should the royals come clean about her health?
First, though, Formula One boss Christian Horner has been cleared of inappropriate behaviour after a 3-week-long investigation.
But he's not off the hook just yet, as his marriage to Spice Girls' Geri Halliwell is said to be in question after private texts allegedly sent by him to a female employee have been leaked.
Christian Horner released this statement. He said, "I won't comment on anonymous speculation, but to reiterate, I have always denied the allegations."
It was a thorough and fair investigation, he goes on, conducted by an independent specialist barrister, and it has concluded dismissing the complaint made. I remain fully focused on the start of the season.
So joining us now is our sports presenter, Paul Coit. Paul, this story about Horner being in investigation broke, and then about 5 hours later, the Princess of Wales was taken ill, I think, wasn't it? And somehow it got completely overshadowed. So it hasn't had the attention that it would necessarily have had if we hadn't had these big royal stories in the last 3 weeks. But it's on the front pages of all the papers today. Now, he has been cleared, but what else has happened to mean that he's still carrying on?
Someone is out to get him, aren't there? There's something that's going on. Now, as far as we got, is that there was these allegations and the inappropriate behaviour, and this went on for a couple of weeks, and then he was cleared, and then this is all timed very nicely for the start of the Formula One season, which is this weekend. And then this anonymous email was sent to various journalists and people in F1 with the list of all these screenshots from WhatsApp with these different texts on. So
the alleged flirty texts.
The alleged flirty texts were sent everywhere. So the whole story's been everywhere. Now, it's within a day. It was literally within 24 hours of him being cleared, and we're a day away from the Formula One season starting. Now, you just look at that. I mean, if this was Knives Out, you would think there's foul play here. There's something going on. And even from yesterday, the fact that it was all clear and I've got nothing to say, and Red Bull said, we are not going to reveal any more details. That's it. It's a closed book. And it's like, well, this is such a big story. If it was such a closed book and if there was an investigation, how did any of this get out in the first place?
Are you suggesting, Paul?
Someone wants him out of this.
I worked in Formula One for 3 years. It is a dark, murky and highly competitive world in which the stakes are extremely high.
Sure.
Are you speculating that this could be coming from another team?
No, I'm not speculating it could come from another team.
So who might want to get rid of Christian Horner from Red Bull?
Well, let's look at the evidence here. Let's have a look at the evidence. There's power struggles within Red Bull. The man that owned Red Bull and ran Red Bull died in 2022. He was the biggest ally to Christian Horner. More people are coming in. Now, there's rumours that Jos Verstappen, who's Max Verstappen's dad, is not a fan. What I'm doing is it's like a game of Cluedo.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there thinking, OK, who could it be there, or could it be him in the lounge there with a candlestick? And that's pretty much how it could be. Someone, in my opinion, does not want him to be running the team. And this is where all this is coming from. But who it is, I don't know.
And the collateral damage is poor Geri Halliwell / Horner.
Well, definitely.
Look, she's on the front pages of all the papers today.
Spice Girl. My favourite Spice Girl.
Your favourite Spice? Well, she might be on the market soon, Mark, because this is brutal. For the marriage, it's very, very difficult.
Well, definitely. We're going to talk about the implications later of what happens if your partner is accused of flirting at work. But, Paul, here's a million-dollar question for you. Does this go beyond bad PR? Does this now pose a threat to his position, or is it just a bad look for Christian Horner?
I think without a doubt, because I think there are other teams. Now, when we mention other teams who it's in their best interest that probably he's not the principal of Red Bull because they're so successful. Yeah. So they would look at that and go, well, you know, we're not hearing enough about it. We need more. You know, and I think eventually, if this continues, then his job will be untenable and he will have no choice.
So it's like politics, sort of death by 1,000
It's all politics. Politics is everywhere, whether it be...
Is he good at his job, by the way?
He's amazing at his job. He's extremely successful at his job. And you would think within Red Bull, they would be very happy, but there's always, it doesn't matter what industry, wherever you're doing, if it's competitive, there's always someone else that's going to want to stab you in the...
Has he ever flirted with you?
Well, no, he hasn't had the chance, but I've sent him text, but he just hasn't responded. So I'd just like to leave that there.
Well, let me tell you,
more for him.
Formula One used to be hard work to be a woman in that environment, but it was 20 years ago. I'm sure it's better now, I hope. Are we finished with you, Paul? I wanted to talk to you about doping in sport. That's disappointing, isn't it?
We'll have to save that, will we?
We'll save that one.
But we'll talk about poor old Jerry later on, and can this marriage to the Spice Girls survive?
We're also going to be asking in just a moment, where is the Princess of Wales? We haven't seen her, not even a still photo to let us know that she's OK, for weeks. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, let's have some much-needed royal relief. That's right, royal relief. A very interesting story in the Mail today, Bev Turner. A.N. Wilson, who's a very good journalist, has written, the only way to stop the ugly rumours and speculation is for the royals to come clean about Kate and Charles's health. Well, it begs the question, where is Princess Catherine? Of course, she's not been seen for weeks.
gbviews@gbnews.com is the email if you are watching Your Royal Highness. Is it a highness if you're a princess?
I think so.
The person who will know is royal biographer Ingrid Stewart. Good morning, Ingrid.
morning.
Good morning. I mean, we're being a little light-hearted about treating the absence of the Princess of Wales a bit like Where's Wally? However, the British public are genuinely concerned that we haven't even been given a photograph of her at home, perhaps convalescing. We just want to know that she's OK. Do you find it a bit mysterious that we've had no update?
Well, I think it's the internet that's churned all this up. And it also last week, or was earlier this week, when the Prince of Wales was supposed to be doing a reading at King Constantine's memorial, 45 minutes before, William dropped out for personal reasons. Well, I would immediately assume that he had, he'd got a tummy bug or, norovirus or something. He's got 3 kids. He's quite likely to get something. But I think that encouraged everyone to think, oh, my goodness, something's gone wrong with Kate. And, we haven't seen her and where is she? So it's just the rumour mill, rolling itself into a bigger and bigger ball. But Kensington Palace did say that we wouldn't see her until Easter or even after Easter. And I think that's perfectly fair enough. She's trying to recover from what sounds like a very nasty operation. And I don't suppose she wants to, have her photo taken. I mean, I don't think she's obliged to in this case.
OK, interesting.
Yes, I don't think it's really any of our business. And of course, we wish her well, a speedy recovery, Ingrid. Any theories about why Prince William was absent from that memorial for King Constantine? Because that's shrouded in mystery.
Well, as I said, I think he must have been taken ill, because he was out and about.
But Ingrid, wouldn't the palace have said that the Prince of Wales is poorly and is unable to attend?
Well, maybe they should, but they didn't. And of course, if they'd said he's unwell, then everyone would have thought, oh my goodness, the whole royal family is falling apart.
But do you get poorly an hour and a half, 2 hours before an event?
Oh, you could do. I can assure you. But if you've got children and you get something from them, you seriously could do.
Ingrid, we were speculating earlier in the week about whether Prince William didn't attend the memorial service for King Constantine because he found out at the very last minute that Prince Andrew would be there, leading the charge. I don't know whether you saw the footage of Andrew at the front of the... I know you did, Ingrid, at the front of that crowd, really basking in the here he is, basking in the attention, actually, that he's doesn't get particularly anymore, pushing himself to the front. It was absolutely plausible that Prince William, realising 2 hours before that he's going to be there, has said, I don't want to be in the footage with Prince Andrew. He is too damaging to the monarchy. Is that likely?
I think that's highly unlikely. That might be the response of a petulant child, but I cannot believe that William would be like that for a moment. I mean, he's a mature man. He's the Prince of Wales. He couldn't possibly behave like that. If he did, we're all in trouble.
But is it petulant, or is it just very concerned about the image of the royal family, particularly on the global stage? He just doesn't want to have a photograph taken with Prince Andrew in that image.
No, well, I completely can see that. And I know, especially amongst young people, they regard Prince Andrew in a very unfavourable light, and it would be better if he wasn't seen at these family gatherings. But it was a family gathering, and I think what really irritated people was the way that Andrew pushed himself to the front and seemed to be sort of almost running down to get into St George's Chapel. But I think we're being a bit unfair here. But
Ingrid, let me interrupt you for a moment. You've written a wonderful book about Queen Elizabeth II and her son Charles. The book is called My Mother and I, the inside story of the King and our late Queen. It's a wonderful read and a fascinating read as well. Of course, the Queen's regime was very different in terms of revelations about health details. It was unprecedented for King Charles to reveal that he was being treated for prostate cancer. Do you think that this new generation of royals have handled the PR around their health issues well?
I think they have handled it quite well. I think the trouble is you can't give a little bit of information because, as we know, and all those dreadful cliches, give them a bit and they want 5 yards. Or I think you either have to give all the information. I think what's happened here is the King has given a bit of information, and I think that's made people want to know more. What kind of cancer is he suffering from? When did it start? Was it before prostate? All those sort of questions. So I think he sort of got it right, but not completely.
OK. Ingrid Seward, lovely to see you, as always. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. We are still reflecting on that victory of George Galloway in the Rochdale by-election last night, very much standing on a Gaza ticket on a Middle East single-issue election.
And still to come, she's never far from the headlines. Suella Braverman warns the UK is becoming unrecognisable due to mass immigration. Can the government get a handle on Britain's border crisis?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday, though. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Mark Dolan and Bev Turner for one day only. Lovely to have your company. Still to come, the latest from Rochdale as we analyse George Galloway's return to Parliament after 9 years away.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it?
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock on Friday the 1st of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Mark Dolan.
Galloway takes Rochdale. George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has delivered a stunning defeat to the mainstream parties by sweeping the seat of Rochdale with 39.7% of the vote.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
And political fallout. We're going to be bringing you the latest from across Westminster and beyond as Britain awakes to this shock result. Galloway's victory is already got many talking. Nigel Farage is warning about sectarian politics in the UK.
This is it. Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
This cannot go on. That's the stark warning from former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who says Britain will become unrecognisable if record levels of immigration are allowed to continue. Is she right?
You make me dizzy from your kisses. Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until...
And UK Eurovision release. It's already quite catchy, that, this morning. Our entry to the music event. Ollie Alexander releases his song Dizzy. Are we going to have better luck this time, or will it still be nil point?
And should we buy him a T-shirt that fits? I should point out that the Eurovision entry comes with a video featuring the wonderful new singing star that will be competing for Britain, but wearing a T-shirt that shows most of his tummy. I'll be honest, I'm in middle age and I couldn't pull it off.
That's for our radio listeners right there. Get in touch with us this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev and Mark. I nearly said Andrew. Mark's definitely in today. It's just gone 11 o'clock and we start with the latest developments in our top story this morning, that Labour has apologised to voters in Rochdale for not putting up their own candidate after last night's by-election win by George Galloway. The returning MP told the Labour MP, who Labour says will stoke fear and division, told crowds that his victory was for Gaza. During his career, the leader of the Workers' Party has also presented programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Well, taking to the stage last night, Mr Galloway again spoke of that conflict in Gaza.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
Well, in response to Galloway's win, the Labour Party's Deputy National Campaign Coordinator, Ellie Reeves, told GB News earlier that last night's result isn't how they wanted the by-election to play out.
Well, we didn't stand a candidate in the by-election, and that's regrettable, but Keir Starmer took swift action when those comments of Azhar Ali came to light, and he was suspended from Labour. So he went into this by-election without a candidate. You know, when you look at previous by-elections, just 2 weeks ago, we had victories in Wellingborough and in Kingswood. In Wellingborough, we had a swing to Labour of 28.5%.
We've also been hearing what residents in Rochdale think about those latest results from the area. Here's what they had to say.
I think it's a really, really good thing for Rochdale and just for the country in general. It's been a long time coming. He's been supporting the right side of history for a long time.
He played into the hands of the population, really, just to get into that position of power, really, to get that seat in Rochdale. I think he's done it selfishly just to get into government.
I'm just really disappointed. I mean, the man, he doesn't live here. This is the third political party he's managed to wangle himself into.
In other news, we've heard today that the cost of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million, plus hundreds of thousands more for each migrant that's sent to the African nation. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. There'll also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated there, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. The government, though, insists the plan is vital to clamping down on illegal migration. Meanwhile, the former Borders and Immigration Inspector has said that the government made perverse decisions in its rush to clear the backlog of asylum seekers. David Neal was sacked last week amid a row over the quality of borders checks. In a new report, though, he suggests that the routine quality assurance has been sacrificed for what he called increased productivity. Neal blames the Home Office for allowing the asylum seeker system to become what he calls a burning platform. Meanwhile, a separate report has also revealed that more than 460 children have gone missing from hotels in less than 3 years, with 147 still unaccounted for. In Moscow, there's a heavy police presence near the church that will hold the funeral of Alexei Navalny that we believe will be starting in the next few minutes. In the run-up to the funeral, his family accused Russian authorities of blocking plans to hold a bigger memorial service, something the Kremlin has denied. Navalny's allies also accused President Putin of murder, but the death certificate, according to reports, say Navalny died of natural causes. Here in the UK, MPs are set to consider a proposed law to ban LGBT conversion practices. The bill would impose unlimited fines on offenders who offer or advertise services to change a person's sexual orientation or to change a person to or from being transgender. It's the third time the long-delayed law has been considered, following pledges by former Prime Ministers, including Theresa May and Boris Johnson. And as we've been hearing, for lovers of the Eurovision Song Contest, the UK's entry has now dropped.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until...
Ollie Alexander has launched his brand new single called Dizzy ahead of this year's song contest due to take place in Sweden in May. The 33-year-old singer has already enjoyed success with his former bandmates in Years and Years, scoring a combined top 5 top 10 UK singles and 2 #1 albums. He hopes the new single will transport you somewhere magical. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or of course go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. It is 11:07. Thank you for joining us on GB News. So George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
In a once safe Labour seat where the party came forth, this was his victory message to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza.
We're joined now by our political editor, Christopher Hope, this morning. Morning, Christopher. Areas of Rochdale are incredibly deprived. In fact, the centre of Rochdale is considered to be one of the most deprived place in Greater Manchester. Some people would say, surely the local residents have other issues more pressing than the situation thousands of miles away in the Middle East. So what has happened, Chris?
Well, hi, Bev. Hi, Mark. Yeah, we relocated out of the snow in Rochdale to the Wetherspoons in the town centre. And I've got to say, you say that, and I know that's what we say about Rochdale, but the shops around here seem very new, and it seems like a very prosperous town centre to me. It almost goes against the image that you talked about there. But yeah, there's no question here that George Galloway has focused on the large number of Muslim people living here, a concern about Gaza, the Israeli attacks there on the Palestinian population after the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, and use that to whip up support for him. That's why he said this win is for Gaza. I was struck by the fact that the person who came second was an independent candidate called David Tully, who fought on hyper-local issues about the local hospital, about Rochdale FC. But stepping back, we are now getting used to this idea of George Galloway back in Parliament, 9 years since he was last an MP, and people responding to it. The British Board of Deputies who speak for the Jewish community in Britain are saying that he should be shunned when he appears in Parliament next week. They're very upset about he might use Parliament as a platform for some of his views. The Labour Party has apologised for the fact that that their candidate, Azhar Ali, who came fourth behind the Tory party, was listed as a Labour candidate on the ballot paper when, of course, he'd been dropped by the party because of remarks he made about Israel, which were made after the print of the ballot papers. A complete mess of a by-election, really, to have these kind of differing results. But George Galloway is back, and Westminster is reacting to that right now.
Indeed, Christopher, it's only one MP, but George Galloway is a gifted orator, and he will use his platform to expose and exploit Labour's division over Israel.
He's defined himself against the establishment for so long. He was a Labour MP from 1987, and then he quit the party, kicked out in 2003 over his opposition to the Iraq War. He then founded the Respect Party in 2004. He's represented 4 different constituencies. Only Winston Churchill has done that, Mark. He's been in Parliament, in and around politics since 1987, an absolutely extraordinary debater. There's a video of him debating with Christopher Hitchens, a former writer, about the Iraq War in 2003, 2004, and it is electric. The language he uses, he can really whip up an audience, and he will certainly get Parliament talking when he starts making speeches there. People won't like what he's saying. Some people won't like it at all. But I think it's going to make politics very interesting for the next few months before the election.
And Christopher, is it voter apathy which has meant that the traditional parties, Labour, Conservative, what are often called now the uni party, the two of them together, is that why a lot of people just didn't turn out to vote?
I think there's certainly, if you look at if you break it down in the two parties, the Labour supporters were told not to get out there. They were told don't vote for this individual, and that's why their vote was so depressed. Normally, a seat held by Sir Tony Lloyd, who died in January, with a 10,000 majority. They should have won that seat in normal times, but there was no campaign behind the Labour candidate. The Tory party, they've done quite well, but a lot of Tory supporters are sitting on their hands. They're tired of the fact that Boris Johnson was dropped as leader. That still rankles, and the fact that the party had a problem with Liz Truss, and now Rishi Sunak's trying to put it all back together again. So basically, individual groups on both sides of those parties are upset with them, and that's why you see a 6,000 vote majority for George Galloway.
Chopper, very briefly, I'm glad that you've retired to the comfort of the Wetherspoons in Rochdale. A quick internet search tells me that you're in the Regal Moon, and if you don't know, let me tell you that you can order food and drinks with your phone. It comes straight to your table.
I'm waiting for Bev to buy me a beer, and it'll come to our table. Bev, you know where I am.
I would love to. I spent most of my teenage years in Rochdale at the Bourne pub. It's got very good food, actually. And I used to swim for the Rochdale Aqua Bears.
There you
See,
go.
who knew there was such a thing as an Aqua Bear? I've often...
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I used to swim for Rochdale. Spent most of my teenage years there. Went to Sixth Form College in Bury, just down the road. And actually, it would have been unimaginable, however many years ago that is, that a Middle Eastern issue would have dictated the election of that area's MP. But Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Go and enjoy your pint at the Wetherspoons. It's remarkable, that change in such a short period of time. Former mill town, of course.
Indeed, and that change is going to gather pace.
I mean, I'm not that old.
No, definitely.
I wasn't there when the water mills and
You
the
look like
cotton
a
mills.
teenager to me, but then I've got eye issues. Okay.
Right, we're joined now by the co-founder of Together UK, Alan Miller, who has been putting some brilliant videos, morning Alan, on social media all week. You've been in Rochdale, haven't you? Why were you there this week, and what did you learn about the people there?
Well, but we've been in all of the by-elections recently. So we were in Wellingborough and Kingswood, and we're going up and down the country, encouraging all of the constituents and citizens to be engaged, to ask questions, to put all of the candidates under pressure around key issues, around net zero and the impacts, the costs and benefits, around, and if they'll sign the Together pledge, on transparency, on free speech and censorship, and on the cost of lockdowns, cost of living, which in a place like Rochdale, where you can see the impact on things economically, has been so damaging over the last couple of decades, and our former industrial towns around Greater Manchester are of paramount concern. So we've been out across the constituency, talking to people, giving out flyers, encouraging them to be engaged and to have their voices heard and put people under pressure, because we think one of the issues that we're faced with is a disillusionment, disappointment, cynicism, despair, actually, with mainstream politics, with politicians who seem to say things and never do them, and a big chasm and a gap between the public and our interests and our needs, and the people that are currently in Westminster are often look the same, talk the same, and don't really put the interests of the public at the forefront. So at Together, we're passionate about something. We haven't said who to vote for. What we're saying is get engaged, use our muscles, build a strong public that can put them all under pressure, because the only way to keep anyone honest is to make sure we as the public are strong and active and engaged.
So when you were chatting to the residents there, Alan, did you find repeatedly that people would say to you, the most important issue on my mind is Gaza? The most important issue to me, I'm going to vote for an MP who is going to make noise in the House about advocating for a ceasefire. Because if not, how has this happened?
Yeah, well, the answer is no, but, Bev, because it depends where you are. So, but I think, we did an interview that you can see at Together Deck with a really interesting guy who's an entrepreneur, who said, he has particular views about the region and what's happened, but he's much more interested in what's going to be done for Rochdale. What's going to happen in Rochdale economically, what it's going to mean for his business, tourism, crime. There isn't an A&E there. There aren't all sorts of facilities and services. They've all been stripped away. When you listen to things like that, and the lack of infrastructure, the lack of opportunities for young people, the lack of provision and services for older people, what you really see is this levelling up discussion run amok. You see this situation where many towns face real problems, and also where you've got identitarianism, you've got an elevation of identity politics, and also across the constituency, many others have just not come out and feel disillusioned. So the thing is, what's happened is a very active campaign amongst a certain demographic has pushed something, and it's been very successful. But I think more broadly, the question of what do we all need? What's our common universal requirements? What does that mean? And also, how do we talk about values, democracy, rights, liberty, freedoms, without it becoming so demarcated into identitarian politics? I think that's really essential. People will have strong views about international things, but really you can see in Rochdale, the major issues they're facing, as well as some of the things that have happened around the grooming gangs, is around education, housing, health, the economy. How do you create wealth creation for everyone, a dynamic society? None of those things are really being addressed. And in some ways, this seems to have been hijacked by one particular thing that's very important for some. But it's got to be said, that campaign was run, and the second candidate has been noted, David Tully, also did very well. He did very well, actually, on local issues. He did challenge the grooming gangs. And I think what it really represents is that the major parties, we're going to see more of this sort of thing across the country. And I'm quite excited about that, about independence. But it also means if you really want to see something change, you can't just sit back and complain. It's up to everyone. It's up to all your viewers.
That is
it's up to everyone to get involved and have their voices heard.
You're so right, Alan Miller. Thank you so much. Thanks for what you do as well. Those issues are so important. Like you say, if you don't like it, get out and stand in the next election.
More power to you, Alan. An important voice during the pandemic as well, of course.
Yeah.
That's where he really got started. Still to come, Suella Braverman warns that Britain is becoming unrecognisable due to mass migration, saying it's not what the British people voted for. Does she speak for you? You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, you're watching or listening to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with myself and Bev Turner.
We are joined back in the studio by political commentator Emma Webb and author and broadcaster Amy Nickel, with the addition of Turner. Yay. Excellent name to choose, Amy, to stick on the end. Right. We've touched upon this already today, but I think it was quite nice to have two women in the room to talk about this. This is the scandal that is hitting the Jerry Halliwell-Christian Horner marriage, Amy. How do you handle this as the wife? What does Geri Halliwell do now? These texts have been revealed. We can't validate how true they are or their veracity, but I don't believe there's been a statement denying them at the moment. And it looks like, even though he wasn't doing anything that might have been wrong in terms of the corporate rules of his team, perhaps he wasn't quite fulfilling his husband role.
No. Wasn't it something like 79 screen grabs that were provided as evidence? So there's only one route out of this, and that is divorce. I can't believe he has done this to not only the greatest Spice Girl, but one of our best celebrities ever of all time, Geri Halliwell, the queen of UK popular culture. How dare he? But the best thing, I think, the subtle shade of this story is that the Sun's headline, instead of calling him F1 boss, Geri's hubby. That's all you are, mate. Geri's hubby, and you're not even that anymore, probably.
So just a little recap for people that may just have, been living in a sort of bunker and don't know fully
where
the
they
story.
don't have a copy of the Sun.
He is a top F1 boss.
Yeah, he's the F1 boss, isn't he?
And he was accused of essentially inappropriate behaviour to a female colleague. It's been fully investigated by an independent adjudicator. No case to be answered. But how do you feel as his wife when your husband is accused of these things? Even if he's cleared, it's going to be a strain on the marriage, isn't it?
It's just so unbelievable, but it's so common. So many men are found guilty of doing this, and I think what they think is well, if there's nothing physical, then it doesn't count as cheating.
Right.
But yeah, he's been sending inappropriate messages. It would seem.
The whole point is the investigation has found that it wasn't inappropriate. So, but when you're the wife, do you think there's no smoke without fire? Is that what we're playing on Geri Halliwell's mind right now?
Absolutely. I mean, the front page says sexts.
Sext messages, Emma. It's all very grubby, isn't it? But do you think she's the kind of woman that will just turn around and say, "Girl power, I'm off"?
This is one of those stories that just makes me hate the world that we're living in, because I actually think that this is the sort of thing that should be kept within a marriage. I don't think that this should be splashed all over the front page. I personally, frankly, couldn't give a damn what's happening in their private life. Yeah, I mean, maybe she will be girl power and just walk and say this is sort of like beneath my dignity. But I'm a believer in traditional marriage, and I think, to quote St. Paul, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and they should make a good go of it. I haven't seen the screenshot, so I don't know how bad it is, but I do think that, whatever these screenshots are of, I mean, having it over the front page news is going to put a strain on their marriage. And I think that's sad, frankly. I think it's a sad state of affairs that people are so interested in this.
And I find your religious take on that really interesting, actually. So, as a Christian, as somebody that believes in the sanctity of marriage, do you believe that you should stick with it at all costs?
I recognise that some people need to get divorced because of, if there's abuse in a relationship or whatever. But I do think that there should be a very, very high bar. And from a sort of like Christian sacramental perspective, I personally don't really believe in divorce. And I think that people do make mistakes or do things wrong at various points in marriages. And if you really do believe in the vows that you make till death do us part, then you should stick with it.
That's the thing, isn't it? The vows. He made the vows. So those come with responsibility.
Oh, he's breaking his vows.
Don't break the vows.
Okay,
we don't know for sure. We should be really clear about that.
Don't allegedly break the vows.
This full independent inquiry has said no case to answer, not inappropriate behaviour. But Bev Turner and all three of you, I want to ask you, is flirty texts with a colleague a sackable offence? Is it grounds for divorce? I mean, look at what some other men get up to.
I think it very much depends on the context, doesn't it? And whether, we don't know the detail of these messages. And we were talking earlier about whether you put a kiss on the end of your texts or your WhatsApps, whether that's appropriate. I always do. I generally do. But I would do that to my female friends and my male friends. It doesn't necessarily mean it's flirtatious. And I think if you have a partner who would take issue with a kiss on the end of a very innocent text, then that partner might be a little controlling, perhaps.
Well, definitely. I mean, the bottom line is, is flirting a bad thing?
What, flirting
as long
when
as
you're married?
You don't act on it,
no, this is
okay?
I hate this because I think this is
what
an
do you
excuse
think, gorgeous?
that a lot my husband's watching. That a lot of men think as long as it doesn't get physical, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And I think this is all too common, and people think they can say, oh, it was just flirting, and it's actually a form of gaslighting to women to be like, it was just flirting, it's just flirting. Yeah, that's...
Well, I agree.
That's what eases your conscience.
I think that, Horner aside, Emma, I think that this sort of level of flirtation that others get up to, I think it's the first rung on the ladder to infidelity.
Well, his name is looking a little bit like nominative determinism at the moment.
I think people should be loyal and not behave inappropriately, but I also don't believe that we should sort of be living in a Puritan society where you're not even allowed to have banter with people.
Well, that's another
if somebody takes things the wrong way.
That's another point. Briefly, Bev, Netflix, the US company, which is ultra woke, has got contractual rules about how you're not allowed to make eye contact with a colleague of the opposite gender for more than 3 seconds.
No.
Yeah.
It's like living under Taliban rules.
Well, it's the idea of to prevent any flirtation, and now it's harder for people to find love at work. So what about flirting in the workplace? I don't know.
That's awful.
If you're single, Mark.
Right.
Listen, I really want to talk about this story about this West End play. Now, it feels like an old story, Amy, and in some ways it is. This is the play that has said that they want to have some nights with just black only. It's called Slave Play. Black-only audiences. Number 10 has waded in, Amy. What's happened?
Yeah, I think Number 10 couldn't resist the culture war, to be honest. This has been hijacked, hasn't it? It's a well-intentioned move by a black playwright to encourage underrepresented audience members to come and see a play that is telling a black story. It's 2 nights, and there's like 62 other nights that you can go to. They haven't said white people aren't allowed. So if, say, my husband was black, I can go. But if I went with a group of my white mates, it might be a bit weird. I think in the same way, if a female wrote a play about a women's issue such as FGM, something quite intimately about womanhood, and women wanted to go, and then they said, well, let's have a women-only night, that's all it is, really.
But I don't think I'd be OK with a woman-only night either.
So we have a ladies' night for all sorts of things.
That Alan Miller just did, this identitarianism. I love that.
Look, the play itself, actually, it's about interracial relationships, and it's as far as I understand it, it's a kind of group therapy session that happens at a plantation where the black partners in the relationship no longer feel sexual satisfaction, and then they go to this therapy session to explore the master-slave dynamic. I mean, the play itself sounds like a wild ride, to put it lightly. I think this is wrong. I think it's sinister. It is actually against the law, which is why I think now they are saying that actually, although it's black only, you can come along because they can't stop you. It would be illegal for them to. But this is racist. This is trying to bar a section of the population on the grounds of their race alone, and that is. It's wrong, it's racist, and it's immoral.
It's a concerted effort to get black theatre goers because they typically don't go to the theatre as much.
Tickets are £125. If they wanted to be inclusive, they should do it cheaper so that people who are in a lower economic bracket are able to go along to the play. So it's hardly inclusive. I mean, the idea that you would define inclusivity in this kind of Orwellian way as excluding people on the basis of their race and probably excluding people on the basis of their income
but
is bad.
As I've said, it's not excluding, it's just picking out a couple of different nights where they're encouraging people that can go and feel a bit more
white people are not
surrounded by people which the storytelling is about.
What about mixed race people? What about British Asians?
That's exactly why they've said black identifying people.
OK, but it's
this term that means if you have a black grandparent and a black parent, you're mixed race, but you still identify as black. It's open to you.
It's also practically mythological, right? Because when you say the black community and you're talking about power dynamics and so on, what do you actually mean if you're just black identifying? There's a huge amount of diversity in the non-white population of this country. And it's actually, I mean, we were talking earlier about interethnic conflicts. There are all sorts of different dynamics. And so this importation of an ideological way of viewing race from the United States, and even there was an actor who commented on this saying that until recently, I think she intimated that we had some kind of colour bar in this country. During the war, our soldiers were shocked by the racial segregation amongst American soldiers. So this is just a sheer, straightforward importation of ideology that's coming over from America, and it's offensive. It's offensive to white people and it's offensive to black people.
But then in that case, You don't have to go. You don't have to buy a ticket. We wouldn't even...
I wouldn't be welcome even if I wanted to.
But what are the chances of us on this channel talking about some avant-garde play about interracial couples were it not to have a little moan about white grievances? Like, why can't we just let this happen and let the people enjoy it if they want to?
I think
if this was for PR, they've done very well.
But actually, I think so often we talk about melanin when we should be talking about social class. So I think the issue for me is make the tickets cheaper and you will get more ethnic minorities into
I agree that on the tickets being cheaper.
and perhaps boost marketing and advertising in areas that are ethnic in this country.
Invite some schools with ethnic kids and get the numbers up.
There you go. Well, look, still to come.
Won't you make me different from the kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until...
This is the hot off the press UK Eurovision Song Contest entry. Ollie Alexander, I think it's is he a he or is he a they them? I'm not sure, but he really is rather woke. Anyway, this is his song Dizzy. Is it doing it for you? Is it making you dizzy, Mark Dolan?
It is. I think it's a good tune, actually. He did a duet with Elton John, It's a Sin, at the Brits, and he's a real talent.
I have to say, we've been playing this on the half hour throughout the show, and I'm bopping along now. It's very catchy. First, though, the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just coming up to 11:35, and I just want to start by bringing you some breaking news that we've heard in the last half hour or so, that a man has been given a rare whole-life order for what a judge has described as a ferocious and merciless attack on his former partner and her new boyfriend. 27-year-old Katie Higton and her 25-year-old partner Stephen Harnett were killed in a brutal knife attack. The court heard that Marcus Osborne, who's 35, waited for Miss Higton at the house they used to share before killing her. He then used her phone to lure her new partner to that address. Miss Higton's mother has described her daughter's killer as a monster of the worst kind. In other news today, Labour has now apologised to voters in Rochdale for not putting up their own candidate. That's after last night's by-election win by George Galloway. The returning MP, who Labour says will stoke fear and division, told crowds that his victory was for Gaza. During his career, the leader of the Workers' Party has also presented programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Taking to the stage last night, Mr Galloway again spoke of the conflict in Gaza. The cost of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million, plus hundreds of thousands more for each migrant that's sent there. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. And there'll also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. The government, though, has insisted the plan is vital to clamping down, they say, on illegal migration. And in Moscow, hundreds are gathered to bid farewell to the late Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny. If you're watching on TV, you can see crowds there who have been heard chanting his name as the coffin was carried into the church. Tight security, though, remains in place in the area after Russian authorities were accused by his family of blocking their plans to hold a bigger public memorial. Navalny's allies have also accused President Putin of orchestrating the murder, but the death certificate, according to reports, says Navalny died of natural causes. Those are the headlines. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2633 and €1.1681. The price of gold is currently £1,625 and 48 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,675 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
We're about to talk to David Tully in just a moment. He's the guy that came second in the by-election last night in Rochdale. Can't wait to hear what he has to say. Also, though, at 12 o'clock, Good Afternoon Britain, with just Emily.
With just me.
Shall I lend you Mark Dolan for the afternoon?
Go on, Mark, do a few more hours.
I'm available for hire, definitely. Come on.
On consult the bosses. But yes, for now, on my own, of course, we're going to be talking about the by-election and George Galloway's win there. The question also of postal votes. Now, this is something that's been brought up by Richard Tice and the Reform Party. Why has there been such a huge rise in the number of people doing postal votes? And is this a problem? Of course, no one has any evidence of foul play at this stage, but it does worry me. And I think it worries a lot of people whether there could be... We've seen accusations of intimidation, we've seen accusations of threats. Could it be that postal votes are gerrymandered in some kind of way? So we shall see.
What would that look like, though? How could you gerrymander postal votes?
Well, so I think it was Nigel Farage who said... Now, this is what he said last night on the show. He said that perhaps what would happen is a candidate would follow the postman and sort of, you know, when the postal vote goes in there, they could say, you know, stand over and say, oh, you're going to vote for this guy or whatever. Now, we don't know if this is happening. We don't know for sure if this is happening. But if there has been such a sharp rise in the number of people doing postal votes, I think that's a fair enough question to ask why, at least.
And actually, Jacob Rees-Mogg was interesting on this last night, about 1 o'clock this morning, I think it was. I saw him talking about this with Tom. The idea that as a family, you've got 5 people of voting age living in one house, the privacy of going into a voting booth has gone. And if you have one person in that family who says to all of those, even if it's young people, you've got to vote for that guy, you've got to go for that, and if you don't, you know, there's trouble.
And also, postal votes go off early.
Where's the democracy?
They go off early,
They go off early.
They don't have the campaign.
You know, the campaign, things develop in campaigns, and truths are unfolded, and in the end, I think for our democracy, you need, ideally, people to vote on the day.
Yeah. OK, I'm sorry, Emily, that was all we had time for. But you've got 3 hours of Emily this afternoon, and it will be brilliant. Don't miss it. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Mark Dolan and Bev Turner. Lovely to have your company. By the way, I should say I'm back at 8 o'clock tonight for Friday Night Live.
Oh, you're doing the Nord tonight as well,
I've got nearly as many gigs as Bev Turner.
Double shift from Mark Dolan. Good to see. Now, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has said that with current levels of immigration, if they carry on, the UK will become unrecognisable.
Official figures show that 1.4 million people were granted visas last year alone, as more foreign workers arrived in the UK than at any point since 2005. So does Suella Braverman have a point?
Well, joining us now is human rights lawyer David Hay. Morning, David. Good to see you. How do you respond to this sort of rhetoric from Suella Braverman, particularly on the morning of a by-election, which has been won by one man standing on a Middle East issue?
Good morning to you both. I think I think she's doing it for politics as opposed to any other reason. But the reality is what she says has an awful lot of truth in it. But that is what immigration does. Immigration, when you're bringing people in from other countries to wherever, it does change things. We only need to look at where we are now and look at where we were, say, for instance, 100 years ago. How things have changed in terms of the makeup of the people in the country. That's a fact, you know. And so, whilst I often disagree with many things she says, on the points of what she's made here, that it will change things. Of course, it will. It's immigration. Different types of people are coming into the country, so that will happen.
Like so many of the issues we talk about here, David, it's one of those topics which requires the correct words without being accused of being racist or peddling some sort of nationalistic agenda. Don't you think, as a culture, we need to get better at finding ways of talking about this issue without fear of upsetting people?
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, even from my side, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I often say things which upset people. And you have to tiptoe around issues so much, I think, that we've got to have a lot of very grown-up, difficult conversations in this country around things like human rights, around things like immigration, because the current system that we have, it's not working for anybody. The only people that are benefiting are the very bad people that are abusing these systems. We need to have these discussions. It's very difficult to have them if you accidentally, for instance, in my case, once I missed the plus off the LGBTQ, and I had a lot of hate from that. So, I think we need to have grown-up conversations, particularly about immigration. We saw from the figures of the National Audit Office today, the system is not only broken, I don't know what's after broken. I mean, it's hopeless at the moment. And where do we go from here? So I think Suella Braverman is right in what she's saying, but I think she's very much saying it for the wrong reasons. And of course, she was part of the government.
David, briefly, if you can, at what point will this issue of the level of immigration into the country start to affect the outcome of general elections?
Well, I think we're seeing that now. I think it's become an issue. It's one that was made an issue by successive prime ministers and home secretaries, and I think it is one of the issues that you're going to see people very, very upset with during this election year, and you're going to see the ramifications of that in the election results. So it's already there. I think we're at that scenario now, and you can see that when you look at the likes of Suella Braverman making these big statements. She's doing it for political reasons because she knows people care.
Yeah. OK, great to see you, David. Short and sweet. Human rights lawyer David Hay there. I also blame the media for the fact that we can't talk about this debate and we've been silenced, and anybody that uttered any sort of concern about the high street being unrecognisable in the last 10 years has just been quelled.
And that is why GB News exists, to have those conversations that the others won't.
That's right. And we love having those conversations, and we love the fact that you are here to have them with us. Right, still to come.
Is this our year for Eurovision? We'll get the latest, of course, many hopes rest with Ollie Alexander. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Lots of people very concerned about what's happening in the Middle East. Iran obviously denying it, but the next move from the United States, our key allies, will be absolutely key.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of talk about where this could go, whether the situation could be escalated. But I think the chatter is heading in the right direction, which is about de-escalation. So if there are going to be targeted sanctions against Iran, that's already happened through expelling certain diplomats and other measures there. But you can do that without arm-to-arm combat at this stage. But I think the US will be weighing up all of its options. Antony Blinken obviously gave a press conference in the United States yesterday to say that, there will be a response from the US, but it'll be at their time and it'll be in the way in which they think is the most appropriate. So all eyes are now on the United States as to when it makes that move.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it, how domestic politics plays so much into international politics. The States, they've got a presidential election this year. We've got a budget coming up. So all the noise, both sides. You've got Donald Trump saying, go a bit more hawkish, I suppose you could say, than President Biden. And here we've got all the generals, we've got the Secretary of State for Defence coming out saying, we need conscription, we need more cash. But a lot of that is part of the sort of national narratives rather than actually looking at what's happening in Iran, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it plays into, the very uncertain times that we're living. And you're absolutely right. There'll be supporters of Donald Trump who are clearly adversaries of Joe Biden to say we must act now. It's a demonstration of showing your strength. Opponents of Biden will say that the US looks weak if it doesn't take action now against Iran, who are clearly, as we know, funding these at arm's length organisations like Hezbollah in Tehran, like the Houthis who are carrying out the attacks in the Red Sea. So Iran is responsible.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, folks, the UK's Eurovision entry has been released. It's by Years and Years frontman Ollie Alexander. It's called Dizzy.
Might we have any more luck with Eurovision this year? Let's have a listen.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until the moment?
Mark, I can't lie, I like it. Showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips is with us now to give us her thoughts. Are you bopping away as well, Ellie?
Absolutely. It is such a catchy tune. It's got this 90s electro pop feel. It's very, very reminiscent of Pet Shop Boys, It's the Sin, and also a bit of like Steps, Deeper Shade of Blue, which I think is great because, people will have that kind of affinity with that feeling. And it's really nice as well because it's all about falling in love, so it's a positive song. The only kind of downside is it doesn't really go anywhere. It's very lovely, but it's also, once you've listened to it a couple of times, you're like, okay, there's no real rise and fall in it. There's not that big bang moment where you're going to take it to the next level. But hopefully the fact that it's really catchy will stand us in good stead. And also you have to remember, Ollie Alexander is a performer. His vocals live are usually absolutely incredible. And you think about the stage presence he has when he performed at the Brit Awards with Elton John, when he's done Glastonbury, he can command an audience. So hopefully if they match the staging to it, and, there's nothing to say they can't change it ahead of the live performance at Eurovision, so they can add in these big moments and bangs, and hopefully they'll do that, and that will push us to the top. And at the moment, critics are saying it's definitely going to be a top 10. Some are saying top 5. No one's yet saying it's going to win, but I think we won't get a nil poil with this one, which is, you know, what we all fear the most.
Well, definitely. Listen, Ellie, not everyone can hold their own alongside Elton John, but that was live telly in front of millions of viewers at the Brits for It's a Sin. Plus, he's been a top actor as well. So this boy's got pedigree, hasn't he?
He does, and actually, you know, he himself has admitted that this is a huge risk to take part in. Eurovision way back, I'm talking like, you know, 30 years ago, was something which could really, you know, propel your career to another level. Since then, especially for artists in the UK, you can be ridiculed afterwards if you don't do particularly well. That changed 2 years ago with the likes of Sam Ryder, who came second with Spaceman, you know, and that was amazing for the UK. We haven't won it since 1997. But then, of course, last year, Mae Muller came second to last with her song. And to be honest, a lot of that was down to the performance on the night. Her vocals weren't great. She was pitchy. And although it is the Eurovision Song Contest, it is also about those vocals, that performance on the night. And I think Ollie, you know, really is in good stead for this because, like you said, you know, he's an actor, he's a singer, he's a performer, he's proven his craft. And for him to take that risk shows how much he really wants to do this, because he doesn't need to do this. You know, he doesn't need to propel his career to that next level, but he really wants to take part in this because he's at heart a massive Eurovision fan.
When and where is the next Eurovision, Ellie? I'm not a massive Eurovision fan.
So it's taking part in May. So it's being held in May, and it's going to be in Sweden. It's going to be in Malmo. Because Sweden won last year when it was held in Liverpool. And actually, what's really nice as well, and I'm obviously going to put this as a Scouser, they're holding a huge Eurovision party in Liverpool again to carry on those celebrations. So if you can't get over to Sweden, get yourself to Liverpool.
Fantastic.
Nice one.
Thank you, Ellie. Ellie Phillips there. That is it from Britain's Newsroom for today and for this week. We had a nice time.
Loved your company. Thank you at home. And, of course, you, Bev, in the studio.
Well, Mark will be back on your telly this evening, as always, on a Friday at 8 o'clock. And then over the weekend?
Of course, 9 to 11, Mark Dolan tonight. Mark Meets, Big Opinion Take at 10 and much more.
Up next, though, here's Good Afternoon Britain with Emily. See ya.
It is. On Good Afternoon Britain, of course, we'll be reflecting on the shock by-election result that saw George Galloway win a triumphant victory. What does it mean for Rochdale? What does it mean for the state of our democracy? And also, a mysterious increase in the number of postal votes. Should we be worried about that? And also, you will not believe the cost of the Rwanda scheme, hundreds of billions of pounds. Is it time to just call quit on a scheme that is both expensive and also a failure so far? We'll have all of that after your latest weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There is further hill snow to come through the rest of the day and heavy rain and showers for some areas too. Low pressure's in charge and we have this occluded front wrapped around this low pressure, and that's where the focus for the heaviest rain has been so far today and will continue to be through this afternoon. So that band will push into more northern areas of England and then into southern Scotland later on this afternoon, and snow will fall over the higher ground above around 200 metres. Further south, we'll turn somewhat dry, but there's a risk of some quite heavy showers that bring a risk of further hill snow and some hail, and they will be quite blustery, particularly across the south coast. It's going to be feeling cold wherever you are. The far north of Scotland should stay dry through much of the day, but that band of sleet and snow and rain will push into these areas this evening. So some snow to come for the northern areas of Scotland overnight. Further south, it'll be dry for a time for many areas, but this more persistent area of rain that will bring a further risk of some hill snow will arrive through the early hours of Saturday morning. So we could see some sleety snow by Saturday morning across more central areas and across the south coast potentially, and many areas will see a risk of ice and frost too. So a cold start to the weekend with further outbreaks of rain, particularly across the central area. This area will likely push into more northern areas of England, southern Scotland by the end of the day, and it's going to be another fairly unsettled day with quite a cold wind. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Mike Freer joins me now. Mike, thank you very much for coming into the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, how are you?
It's been a busy day, and it's been quite a traumatic experience. It's a real wrench to walk away from a job that you love, but also a constituency that you've become. You know, I live there; it's my home, and I regard many of my constituents as friends, and it is an amazing place. And to walk away from that is really quite. It's quite an emotional wrench to think this was a job I loved, but unfortunately I can't do it anymore.
Can you talk me through the process? Because you mentioned about the alleged arson attack, etc., being the final straw, but this has been a really quite vile journey to get to this point. So what kind of threats have you had? What's that look like?
Well, like every MP, I mean, you day in, day out, you get abusive emails, you get low-level stuff that, whether we should accept it, but we do, it's graffiti, you know, it's things like, you know, in the past I've had a mock Molotov cocktail left on the office door, meaning we had to evacuate the whole building. I've come out of my house and found a note on my car. Where I live is common knowledge, but what I drive is less so. And it's a few weeks after John Mann had the wheel nuts on his car tampered with. So that all kind of makes you get a bit, you know, what on earth's going on. But I've had 2 run-ins with the organisation that was Muslims Against Crusades, and people like Anjum Chowdhury, who was behind that organisation, been to prison. But online it said, I used to do surgery in mosques, so I wanted to go out and see people. And online, it's a picture of me saying, you're not welcome in our mosque, let Stephen Timms be a pointed reminder. So it's not very subtle.
Well, just for our viewers and listeners who might not remember that,
Stephen Timms, of course, was stabbed by a woman who'd been radicalised. Thank heavens he survived. So it was a very unsubtle.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 12 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of March. So Keir Starmer has woken up this morning to the